So we do have some Slido polls. So we'd really appreciate your feedback, your input, your participation today, and we strongly encourage it. Please feel free to raise your hand, leave questions in the chat, or unmute yourself to talk. We definitely welcome all participation, and we'll pause periodically to address some questions. Today we'll do a little recap, a few updates, then we'll jump into the generation of new mitigation action items, part 2, and then we'll review the remaining timeline for the project. So some updates to watch for. We are in the process of working with Effingham County IT and the Public Information Officer to update the website for the hazard mitigation plan. So we'll be creating a web page that is just for the hazard mitigation plan. It will link the survey. It will link an ArcGIS story map about the process of the project. It will have meeting minutes, meeting recordings. It'll be sort of a one-stop shop for all information related to the hazard mitigation plan update. So be on the lookout for that. That should be live within the next week. As I mentioned, we have a community survey that we've developed. This QR code here will take you directly to the survey. We encourage you to share this with everyone that you know in Effingham County. The more responses we get, the better. This is all information that we'll collect up until pretty much the very last minute, and then we'll incorporate it all into the plan, all of that public input. So please send that out, post it on Facebook. However you can get that survey out is great. On March 24th, some of the team members from Weston and Sampson will be down in Effingham County for a public engagement event. Effingham County Chamber of Commerce is putting on a night out in Effingham County street festival type of event. We will be there with emergency management on March 24th, and we'll be pushing out the survey, talking to citizens about the plan update, and just gathering public input. So if you'd like to join us, reach out. We'd be happy to have you help us hand out survey flyers and talk to the public about the plan. Last update that we have is there will be a public meeting for a review of the draft plan on March 29th at 6:00 p.m. And that's going to be at the Effingham County Administrative Building. So I believe it's on South Laurel Street, the building on South Laurel Street. And again, that's March 29th at 6:00. So we encourage you to get the word out about that as well. Again, the more public input we have, the better. Okay, real quick, let's review before we jump into mitigation action generation. Let's review your revised goals for the 2023 to 2028 plan. 4 goals: minimize loss of life and property from impacts of hazards, improve education and outreach efforts to protect community assets and critical facilities from hazards, increase coordination and capabilities to plan and implement projects to minimize loss from hazards, improve data collection, dissemination, and redundancy to reduce impacts from hazards. So we want to keep those goals in mind as we generate mitigation action ideas today. So how are we going to achieve those goals? Via different mitigation projects. And FEMA and the community rating system group mitigation projects into 6 different categories: natural and beneficial functions of floodplains, emergency services, preventative actions, structural projects, property protection, and public information and education. So we'll review each of these very briefly before we get into it. Preventative activities keep flood problems from getting worse. So that can be stormwater management, building codes, zoning codes, setbacks or buffers. Property protection activities are usually undertaken by property owners on a building by building or parcel basis. Property protection activities include retrofitting, maybe elevating a home, acquisition and demolition, or relocation. Natural resource protection activities preserve or restore natural areas or the natural functions of floodplain and watershed areas. So that can be open space preservation, natural area restoration, wetlands protection, water quality improvement, things like that. Emergency services, measures are taken during an emergency to minimize its impact. So that can be threat recognition, a warning system, or critical facilities protection. Structural projects keep floodwaters away from an area. So that could be a levee or a flood wall, maybe a reservoir, channel modification. And then public information activities advise property owners, potential property owners, and visitors about the hazards and ways to protect people and property from the hazards. So that is any type of outreach project, real estate disclosure, resources in the library, or environmental education. So to refresh, what we've done is reviewed all of these related plans from Effingham County for action items that were identified in these plans. So the comp plan, the Parks and Rec plan, the wildfire plan, the public awareness, the EOP, the master transportation plan, the budget, and the debris management plan have all been reviewed, and we've pulled out action items from those plans and grouped them for you. So we'll be asking you today to rank different mitigation actions that we have found in your other plans. And from that, we will develop new mitigation actions. So from those related plans, there were 6 themes that kind of emerged that seemed like they were very important to Effingham County. Last week, we generated mitigation actions for emergency management, education and outreach, and cooperation among municipalities. This time, we'll be generating action items for natural resources protection, sustainable development, and stormwater management and retention. Then at the end, we'll sort of do a miscellaneous catch-all category for any hazards that we feel like we haven't adequately covered. Before we jump into that, we're going to just review a couple key messages from the 4th National Climate Assessment from the Southeast. Just because FEMA has new regulations for hazard mitigation planning and stipulate that we need to take climate change into account for hazard mitigation planning. So these 4 key messages are important to keep in mind.
I can do the next part.
Okay.
If we want to, in that link up there, there are some maps to support the information in those key messages. And essentially, what we're looking at is some changes in heat and rainfall distributions. Specifically, they're going to relate to the stormwater portion of this presentation. So some of the important keynotes are that the heat conditions are essentially going to stay the same. However, during the nighttime, we're going to see the temperatures continue to stay higher in the evening, even though they're staying sort of similar in the afternoon and during the daytime. As far as rainfall, it seemed that Effingham was in one of the areas where we saw that there would be significant changes in precipitation. So as you can see here, we're looking at almost 100% change even from 1950 to 2016 in rainfall intensity in the area. So moving forward, we've got a couple slides for stormwater management and retention. So one of the cornerstones for stormwater management is the development of an H&H analysis, or essentially a flood model. These studies, they provide insight into the movement of water, including volume and rate of flow through a catch basin, through watershed, through man-made channels, and through drainage. So these types of studies provide decision makers with the information that they need to begin planning future stormwater infrastructure, to be looking at what infrastructure is already in place, and then ultimately to try to create a solution that won't exacerbate flooding in the upstream or downstream portions of the area. So in this slide here, we've got an example of a watershed project that we worked on up in Massachusetts. You can see that even between the 1960 and 2015 events, that we've got a significant increase in rainfall in these 24-hour events, as well as the shorter term sort of rain burst events that we have as well. These are recorded changes. So as we move forward in time, those 10-year events that we're planning for now, or the 25-year events that we're planning for now will soon be the 10-year event that we plan for later on down the road. So I wanted to show you quickly what we had put together for these communities. This Charles River watershed is an extremely large area of about 80 miles, 308 square miles, and it has over 30 municipalities within it. So again, here are the changes in precipitation that we were looking at. And to provide the community a better insight into the rainfall they're experiencing now and what they might see well into the future in 2030, 2050, and 2070, you can see those changes where this 10-year event that we see now is slowly moving down to the current 25-year event and over the next several years, and really close to the life of a mortgage, in fact. So a couple other things that go into the model elements. Our drainage data from municipalities, size and elevations that we record ourselves, and then ultimately the run of that model. And down here, there were a couple more things that I wanted to show you. Been pretty quick here, but we've got some sliders that I found to be a really good way to display the changes that we've seen on the road. And I might have run through them. Here we go. So we've got the 2-year storm present day and the 2-year storm in the future. And we'll see if one of these will load. I'm probably moving faster than this computer can. So there we go, slowly coming in. So as we move the slider to the right, you'll see this is the present day, just 2-year event and the impact on the community. And then we can see the spread from just that simple 2-year rainfall. 24-hour storm. And you can see in here that there are cells that show the expansion of floodwaters. When we go into a community, we really try to determine where they know that there are problem areas, and then we'll adjust the size of those cells to those areas to get a more in-depth analysis in any of the known problem areas in the community. So back here, we also have, as part of this effort, list of strategies and recommendations for the communities to implement. And I think you'll find that these are all very similar to what we've researched for the Georgia Area Green Growth Guidelines. A lot of land conservation and then green infrastructure efforts that provide sort of a low cost of implementation, a high return, and low maintenance in a lot of different categories as well. And we can provide you links to these resources after if you're curious. Moving on. One important consideration for flood modeling and H&H analysis is that whatever you put into the model is what you get out of it. So I've got an example here for a solution that we put together to help identify the areas that we wanted to focus modeling on. And this is actually from a community nearby Charleston called James Island. And what you'll notice in between these two solutions is that both of them utilize a lot of different aspects of ArcGIS, including our survey 123, and then obviously the GIS itself and data collection. So what we've got is sort of a mock-up of these flood reports that we've gotten from the community. And you can see they've been categorized into heavy rainfall and tidal. This is an island, so what we're looking at is different solutions based on the different types of flooding that we're seeing. This just provides a really good idea of, in this area, we know that they're experiencing flooding from heavy rainfall. And I think there are a couple areas in here where we actually have the ability for them not to just tell us their email when they saw the event happen to help us better determine if it was tidal or if it was associated with rain. But we also have the ability, if I can just click on the right one here, to show there we go, with the photo, I believe. We can show what the flooding might have looked like in that area. So it's a great way to get information from your residents and provide sort of a really quick way for Public Works to go out, see where these problem areas are getting reported at, get an immediate idea of what the flooding might be looking like, and then quickly determine whether this is something that you could quickly send out a vac truck to remove debris from the drain, or is this a larger scale issue that has to be addressed. And speaking specifically about the skeleton or the bones of the model, This community has done a really great job in keeping track of the infrastructure that they have in place. So what that allows us to do is then take all of the information from, and I've already loaded it in this one. Or I try loading a whole other one. There we go. Maybe that map will come in a second. But they've got data associated with every inlet and pipe in the area. And because they have such good information, we're able to go in and also survey. So we can send out folks in the field, look at the outfalls, see if there are major cracks in the head walls, look for different decomposition or marine growth in the areas, and then also filter those points. If I go back, I bet you can see the points better. So these red points will then get filtered based on each of these selections here, and we can see what infrastructure has been impacted. This is also a great way to show FEMA that you're maintaining your stormwater infrastructure from year to year. You can use this to track reports, track repairs, and then obviously, again, because you have information on when the pipe was put in, the diameter, the invert elevations, you can get a really good model output from something that's so concise.
Lucas, could you talk for a moment about what it took to just put something like that together? Like just a few of the steps that the community needed to do to get to that point where you've got those good and reliable asset inventories.
Sure, I know a lot of this started, so this, what you're actually looking at here is Kiowa Island. And a lot of the island was essentially just this area. And since about the 1970s, they've really expanded toward reaching out to the farther eastern end of the island. And what this initial step took, because it essentially started from nothing, they went out and they pulled together all of the as-built that they currently had. So any of the drainage infrastructure as-built that they had, they transcribed them first into CAD and then moved that data over into GIS. And then through some field work and surveying, they were able to get the exact invert elevations. Knowing that these data sets aren't always perfect, the most important thing is knowing exactly the direction of the flow. Especially in a community like this where it's extremely flat. There's, not a lot of relief between one inlet to another. So you're looking at something around, maybe half a foot in the best case scenario. But it is a continued effort with their GIS staff. They go out as new projects are being implemented by Public Works. GIS staff are involved. They will go in, pull the as-built from the design plans, add them to this data set, and they try to continue to update it. It's also something that's just, as soon as something is replaced by the maintenance department, the administrator will go in and change the information on the pipe as it's changed as well. But it's an ongoing effort with support and coordination between the engineering staff, Public Works, and GIS. Does that explain it well enough, Jeannie?
Yes, no, it's like sometimes it's a question of where do you start and how do you continue, and thank you. That's very much appreciated. So I'm sorry the map's not coming in completely.
Yeah, these links we'll share as well. It is a shame because there are some ways that we can filter the information to only show what we're concerned about, like these head walls with cracks. But again, whatever you go, as you're planning to do these H&H analyses, it's important to consider all the drainage that you have. And it's something that we've seen regularly working with different communities, is that it saves whoever's performing the analysis a lot of time and field work if that information already exists. And then it also is going to provide a lot better information to the decision makers afterward.
Yeah, the flooding seems to be just a perennial topic for us in the Southeast, and finding ways to grapple with it and understanding, what our community assets are at risk is just a continuous discussion. So tools that we can use to help us mitigate the impacts of flood hazards are crucial. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think I can have this is right.
All right, y'all, so keeping in mind, everything Lucas just talked about in regards to modeling and H&H analysis, let's review the action items that were pulled from related plans. So one was to draft a plan for countywide drainage network and improvement program, complete lift station pump upgrades, pursue funding to improve stormwater treatment and quality, develop a CIP for water and sewer services, right-of-way drainage improvements, and pursuing a stormwater utility fee. So what we're gonna do now is have you log on to Slido and rank these. If you feel that the community is already doing it, please rank it toward the bottom. And then obviously rank what you feel is most important toward the top. So I would also like to encourage you to use the chat if you have additional ideas that aren't on that previous slide. Please put them in the chat. We have someone monitoring that and they will absolutely capture your idea. So you can join at slido.com on your phone or on your other screen, whatever is easier. And the passcode is all caps EFFHMP.
Let's give a moment for people to get to that. Anna, is that a QR code off to the left?
I believe so.
I don't know that my phone is reading that. Is anyone else? I'm not reading that one. Lindsay, is your phone picking that up?
No, it's not.
You can go the old-fashioned way, like the phone was definitely the best option for us. That's such a fancy looking code.
I think that so it generates the QR code once you start presenting it. So there may just be something off with like the screen sharing that's not registering it.
Okay,
That's
well,
weird. Anna, try just going to the next slide because that's very weird.
We could probably just drop the slido.com link in the chat for everybody too.
yes, Lindsay, do
Maybe
you think
that'll
you
be
can drop slido.com in the chat?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then our secret password.
So I just threw a link in the chat. Jeannie, can you double check that? It should take you right to the poll. But just to make sure.
Yes, I can open it on the computer. It's showing I'm opening in Q&A and polls.
But it doesn't show this question?
No. It gives me a chance to type all kind of questions in there for everybody.
Okay, well, if we have to switch gears, let's do that. Not sure why that is giving us difficulty.
Lindsay, if you take control of the screen using that function in Teams, I'm not sure if we can get to the Slido that way. If like more than one of us can.
Oops, I'm just trying to double check if it's all linked correctly. Sorry,
Okay.
everybody, we'll just be a minute, some technical
Stay
difficulties.
tuned. Thank you. It actually didn't prompt me for the password. Thank you for everyone's patience. We'll figure this out.
The bottom left of the Slido front page has a link to present mode, if that's helpful.
Yeah, we can do that. We can just share it directly from Slido. I think the next part about having Slido is that you can all see the results. So let's see. All right. I can take over sharing. So it'll just be a little bit of switching back and forth. And unless you wanted to just try presenting one more time to see if it worked.
Try one more time. Sorry, y'all. I don't know what happened. This was working this morning.
Okay, I can just share it from Slido then.
This one did?
So
So that you can count.
Okay,
All
so
right.
that's the,
this should work. You should be able to scan this and get to it. It's still the same code to get on. So we'll leave that up for a minute so that everybody can get that pulled up on their phone. And same thing, if you want to do it on your computer, you can just go to slido.com and then you can type in EFFHMP into the code to join this.
it was not prompting me for a code, but maybe that's because I'm sitting inside.
The
like, in
link
the
that
inner
I
system.
sent will take you directly to it. So you only need the code if you're navigating from the main Slido webpage. But if you follow that link that I threw in the chat,
gotcha.
then yeah, you don't need the code.
Thanks. Let's make sure to see if everyone is it working. There's a reaction like button up at the top if no one wants to unmute themselves. Like you can tell us if it's pulling up for you.
So I'm gonna go to the first poll question, and we still have the QR code here. We still have the instructions. So
It works.
see if we start getting responses.
So again, if you feel like the community is already doing it, you can rank it pretty low. And feel free to unmute yourself or put your thoughts in the chat as well.
Did you do that by moving it around? Like, how do you rank it?
Yep. So just click and drag.
Oh, nice.
So while we're going through this and you all are ranking these, we did see that in 2021, you all had looked into a stormwater utility and was wondering if anyone had the information on that. If you know, it looks like it's kind of low down on the list. Does anyone here know anything about that? What happened with it? If you're planning to go forward with it?
Hey, this is Chris. I know at that meeting for the that they talked about the implement stormwater utility fee. I know they had a bunch of negative feedback from the public during that time. I'm not sure. I know they kind of pushed it off due to that, just the amount of negative public feedback they got.
Okay. So it's not off the table if there was a way to implement it that people would be a little bit happier with, but right now, from feedback, it didn't seem super popular.
Right.
Looks like we got one more person voting, maybe. And any other thoughts to go in the chat? Let's see.
We have Kristen in the chat. There was a discussion that a better understanding of the exact needs should first be determined. So they went with the master plan for now and held off on the other. So that was about the stormwater utility, Kristen, I'm assuming.
Kristen, will you remind me what the status of that master plan is again? I was trying to remember it a little while ago and I just blanked.
I know they had a meeting the other day to get some additional public input. So I think they're collecting the data from that meeting last week.
Okay, great.
Hey, this is Allison. If you guys just want to let us know what information y'all need for the stormwater master plan, I can get with Angela. She's our capital projects person right now, and get that information over to you guys.
Oh, thanks, Allison.
That'd be great.
Great. Right. I think that looks like we've gotten some good responses, so we'll use that feedback from y'all ranking these to determine some actions moving forward. So thank you for the 7 folks that participated in that. Lindsay, you want to bump us along?
Yeah, so do you want me to continue sharing the presentation?
Sure.
For my computer?
So the next step is we're talking about natural resources protection, area near and dear to my heart. I have 30 years of working towards that and balancing economic development with natural resource protection. We talked a little bit earlier in the presentation about that natural resources protection are activities to preserve or restore natural areas or natural functions of floodplains and watershed areas are of importance to us. And that they implement a variety, these are implemented by a variety of agencies. We have, in our community, our Parks and Recreation Department, our Planning Department, our conservation agencies, and not non-governmental organization NGOs are instrumental in flood protection and natural resource protection. And we talked about a few of the items, but today it's a beautiful day. We're all sitting in front of a computer right now, and nature is important to us. Natural resources are important to us, but they also work for us, and that's a pretty significant thing. It's called ecosystem services. So when we talk about ecosystem services, we think about generally food and that the land provides. Fish and livestock and vegetables and drinking water and timber. So lots of things are happening. But in addition to that, these workers for us, these nature, cleansing effect for air and water. They clean up, pollution. They serve for the food supply for pollination. Trees and plants hold soil in place so that we don't have significant erosion as we grow and develop. We've got, a flood storage. We talked about that in a previous meeting, that wetlands protection, wetlands functions serve to store 1 million gallons. 1 acre of wetlands stores 1 million gallons of floodwaters. So when we start thinking about development in floodplains and development in wetlands, we're losing some critical functions that are helping us, survive now and into the future. So we definitely do want to think about that. We can move on to the next slide, Lindsay. Thank you. So we just talked a little bit about wetlands protection. We also have the opportunity to restore and create wetlands, and we work on a lot of these kinds of projects to help think about the way we do things. On that left-hand panel, you see a recreated wetland that's serving road runoff. And so starting to think about our swales and our drainage in different ways, that it doesn't just have to be an open cut channel or a concreted channel through, that we can actually plant these swales with native species and start reaping the benefits of the additional services, cleaning our air and cleaning our water, that wetlands provide. Land acquisition, we talked a little bit about that, touched on that a moment ago. That's a whole thinking about the big picture of what lands are available as you look into the future for land use planning, strategically targeting those lands, cooperating and partnering with other organizations that are also protecting lands for a different reason. We can achieve our goals together. Next slide. We have a lot of invasive species issues, and the Southeast Phragmites is a big one. That's that big, tall, reedy grass to the left-hand side of your slide, and it's doesn't provide optimal habitat, and it doesn't do as good a job as our native species in providing for clean air and clean water and good places for habitat to nest and rest. The other thing we can do is we can think about our streetscapes and what we're doing, even in our development, not just our streets, but like the new developments going in? Can we have standards for landscaping and species and buffer requirements? Can we preserve some of that nature to do the work for us, or can we put it back to help us? Next slide. So in thinking of the tools in the toolkit, we think about, what policies do we have in place locally, and what we can do. And these are some of the potential options that we have for thinking about moving into the future. Can we look at areas that flood on a regular interval, or that have really critical assets in it that we may want to have different standards for? So if we create a flood hazard district, can we create more protective standards for that area so that we still accommodate the development coming in, but we think more carefully and more thoughtfully about the way it's coming in? And the same for our development reviews. How can we hone our development reviews and think about all the services that natural resources provide, and still leave room for those open spaces, those natural areas in our protection. We just also talked about stormwater management requirements. That goes hand in hand with planning, and as we put more and more roofs and roads and cover our natural resources with services, we need better and more advanced strategies to manage stormwater. And I'll talk about this in a little while, but Georgia is a leader in stormwater management in the southeast of the United States, and actually I think nationally. We have the coastal stormwater supplement that operates in 26, the lower 26 counties in Georgia, and it's required by all the MS4s. So implementing those standards would be a significant step towards protecting natural resources, because in that coastal stormwater supplement and the guidance document and the requirements for communities that implement their own stormwater management, there are planning concepts and better site design and wetlands protection and species protection, all in the context of how do we grow and how do we do this in a really thoughtful way. And obviously the having ordinances in place are another tools. So we can look at, adopting new standards for green buildings. We can look at resiliency and climate in our decision making. We've talked about protecting vegetation and trees. We can have vegetation ordinances. We can think about how this influences our groundwater, because we don't have often much of a separation distance in our region that's more flat between our development areas and our really important groundwater resources. We have seen some movement towards trying to think about that balance between how much pavement we're putting down and what we're preserving for with regards to our trees and our whole natural resource system. We can think about green roofs as an example of treating stormwater. Those roofs just aren't there to shelter us, but they can also do other services for us. Can we use that space that's already being taken up? We've talked about the coastal stormwater supplement and the very ever popular stormwater utility fee. But sometimes we have to find a way to finance these programs that are really great ideas, and looking at the feasibility of a stormwater utility fee helps us get some traction and keep up with the growth that's happening around us. Okay. Lindsay, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, Anna, you guys are muted, I think. Anna was going to cover this slide.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
All right, so just like the last time, these are action items that we've pulled from other plans. Again, if you don't think it's relevant or you think that you're already doing it, rank it toward the bottom. And I just want to encourage you, if you have an idea that you don't see here, please don't be shy. Put it in the chat. All ideas are good ideas. So same thing, Lindsay, if we could do the Slido for this one. Sorry, I'll run through these real quick, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So applying minimum buffer standards for river corridors, a tree preservation ordinance, adopting the DCA criteria or using site fingerprinting for wetland protection, pursuing funding for land acquisitions, green space or tree planting requirements for new developments, open space and natural area preservation via tax incentives, addressing the general deficit in local park acreage, and improving the connectivity of green spaces and natural areas.
I'm sorry, I got a quick question. How did you want us to handle if, we're already doing this? You want that at the bottom?
Yep, rank it toward the bottom.
Towards the
Okay.
bottom, but if you could throw it in the chat or just let us know which one it is, that would be great too.
Okay, thanks.
That first one about the buffer standards for river corridors, we talked about that in a previous meeting, and we talked about getting that overlay up on our, like, the mapping system for the county and being able to apply that for development standards. So I think we were talking about it. So that's a really great opportunity. That exists already, that 100-foot buffer in certain areas, not many, but certain.
We'll give everyone a couple minutes to rank these.
Seeing open space preservation being ranked so high.
It is. Can anyone comment on the present tree preservation ordinance? Do you feel that it's strong enough and adequate? If there's anybody who could talk about it, that'd be great. Looks like we've still got somebody ranking, so we'll take a couple more minutes. Okay, looks like the creation of new park space and open space preservation via tax incentives were the top suggestions. That's great.
So the next topic we were going to cover was sustainable development. I was going to talk about it a bit, but first we're just going to have Jeannie start off with some of her expertise.
So I mentioned before that the state of Georgia felt in many ways has been a leader in the Southeast for sustainable development. As early as 1968, when there was a mining threat in our coastal wetlands in Georgia. The state was able to pass the Coastal Marshlands Protection Act in 1970. That's a really, really big deal. So at least like the protection for our estuarine, our saltwater wetlands went into place before the Clean Air Act in the United States, before the Clean Water Act in the United States, before the Coastal Zone Management Act in the United States. That's a pretty big deal. Like Georgia is a leader there. And I would say that also we didn't face the development pressures in Georgia the way that many other areas have. All we have to do is look to our neighbors in the South in Florida, and we can look in the Northeast and see, when we have really rapid growth and development, what that results in. And that's given us a chance to pause. It gave us a chance to pause for at least a little while, where I think we're seeing the effects now, but it gave us a chance to sit back and think, okay, what is it that we do like about those states and the way they've developed, and what is it that we don't like? And where do we have the chance to do things a little bit differently, and where can we take the lead? So Georgia, in like 20 years ago, Georgia was already working on sustainable development principles and smart growth, and it went about it multiple ways. It's so for like the local development community, the Georgia Green Growth Guidelines had 2 editions of the Georgia Green Growth Guidelines talking about different ways to look at a tract. There was a financial analysis. Here's the same number of condo units, here's the same number of housing, units, here's multi-use, some businesses. Let's put it in different ways and tracks, and let's see if there are ways to conserve a lot of green space for nature to do its work while we still accommodate that growth. So Georgia has green growth guidelines. Georgia has that coastal stormwater supplement that we've been talking about. It's the only stormwater manual in the entire nation that combines the expertise of advanced stormwater protection techniques with better site design and planning. It protects wetlands, it protects species. It's the only one in the nation that's connected to a state wildlife action plan. So it's significant piece of work. And also at the same time, to help communities, the state put into place a suite of model ordinances for those lower 26 coastal counties to look at vegetation, water resources, wetlands management, conservation subdivisions, a whole host of model ordinances. But I say that all to tell you that while the state has done a lot and the local governments were all participants, Georgia is a home rule state. And that means that the local governments have the ability to plan their own destiny. Like the future is up to each local government. Each local government can determine its own laws and its own capacity. So keep that in mind as we're talking about this, because this is in community control. And that is a really great thing about the state of Georgia. Okay, Lindsay.
We did get a comment that Chris Reed has an idea in the Q&A.
Okay.
And I didn't want to pull it up because I was worried it was going to, share over your presentation, Jeannie. But
If you'd like, one idea would be to add planned green space, retention ponds, and wetlands areas to the county property when they acquire roads, lift stations, and wells. So that's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
Fantastic idea. We'll absolutely add it to our mitigation actions. Thank you.
all right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about park space, which was pretty high up on your priorities for our last Slido question. So what we're looking at right now is a park that Weston and Sampson designed. This was up in the Northeast, but this really just shows the opportunity of park spaces. So they offer opportunities to improve recreation. So you can have like these walking trails, you can have recreation fields, but you can also think about other opportunities, including mitigating hazards and mitigating climate change. So one of the ways to do that is by creating a floodable park. So these are park spaces designed to capture and hold water during heavy rain events. It reduces the risk of flooding in surrounding areas, so it will hold the water in those locations. It reduces the impact on your stormwater system because it's holding the water there instead of releasing it into your stormwater system right away. And it allows it to be absorbed into the ground too. So just big reduction on stormwater system and on flooding. So as water is absorbed into the ground, it's filtered and it's purified naturally. So that improves water quality in the area as well. It can support lots of different plants and animal species. So you can do some natural plantings, which you can see down kind of in the bottom right corner of this graphic. It really just flows into the natural system that is along the edge of the stream, and you get a lot of wildlife that enjoys it. So you can really add a resiliency lens and still include recreational opportunities. You could have like this great lawn that's shown, that could be a recreation field, but it can also be designed to flood during a rain event. So when it's raining out, people aren't going to probably be out there as much, like playing group sports. And so during that time, these areas are designed to hold flood water and then slowly release it as the rain stops. And there's a lot of benefits of just generally having green spaces. So that includes public health, reduced stress, increased physical activity, and improved mental health. Floodable and climate resilient parks can really provide these benefits, mitigating climate change, and then also just creating another benefit for the community. To go along with that, so kind of looking more specific at green infrastructure and low impact development, which is also called LID. There are approaches to urban planning and design that prioritize natural, sustainable solutions for managing stormwater and environmental issues. Green infrastructure involves using natural systems, so that includes like forests, wetlands, vegetation to manage stormwater and provide other environmental, economic, and community benefits. So this can really include things like green roofs, rain gardens, bioswales, some of the stuff that Jeannie's already talked about. But these features mimic natural systems and they help to absorb, filter, and slow down stormwater runoff. And kind of on the other side of that, low impact development is a set of design principles that emphasize the use of green infrastructure and other techniques to minimize the impact of development on the natural environment. So it can include using permeable pavement, green roofs again, designing landscape to promote infiltration and retention of stormwater. So these images, so this is just a regular parking lot, but normally when you're looking at a parking lot, they have these planters and they're normally elevated. So when it floods, none of the water is getting into these planters. So there's these trees that are kind of raised up, not really receiving any of the benefit from the stormwater. So another way to do this is actually by depressing these planter areas. So you can see there's little curb cuts. So there's actually a way for when it rains, the stormwater can get into these planters. It can collect in there. So it's watering the vegetation. You don't need to go out and water it. And then it's just holding stormwater. So instead of sending it into your stormwater system, these vegetated areas are holding it and they're slowly infiltrating it into the ground. Oops. And then looking at this on a little bit different scale. So instead of looking at parking lots, we're looking at streets. So the image on here is a rendering of a green street that we designed. And green streets incorporate the solutions that we've been talking about. So they're roadways that are designed and constructed with green infrastructure and low impact development techniques. It usually incorporates sustainable features. So sometimes you have permeable pavement, you can have green roofs on surrounding buildings, rain gardens, bioswales, these little curb bump outs. So there's a barrier between the road and people walking. There's also the opportunity to collect stormwater into those areas. There's so that can reduce stormwater runoff and pollution. It can manage flooding, and it can also improve air and water quality. So having these, which we'll talk about in a second, but having more vegetation can improve air quality, but it can also reduce heat island impact. Lucas had mentioned that a little bit, but we're going to cover it a little more. So when you have a lot of vegetated plantings, so shown on here is a green roof, so there's plantings on these roofs. normally when it's really hot out, all of this like concrete and pavement and everything really absorbs heat, and it takes a long time for those to cool off. When you incorporate plantings, then they absorb the heat in a different way where they don't heat the surrounding air, they just remove the excess heat from the environment. So that they can also improve air quality. So urban heat island, which is kind of what we're talking about right now, where these urban areas heat up and then they stay hot. So they really occur in areas where the temperature is higher, and it's when there's a high temperature for a long time or if it doesn't cool down much at night. So they can lead to a lot of negative impacts, which includes increased energy consumption. So you're turning on your air conditioning a lot, you're leaving it on all night because it doesn't cool down at night. It leads to air pollution and just general health problems. So you can mitigate these impacts by reducing the amount of heat resorbed and obtained on these urban surfaces. So an effective way to do this is by incorporating these green spaces, such as parks, green roofs, and blue roofs, which is actually stormwater storage on a roof. And that can reduce the amount of heat that's absorbed by the building and cool the surrounding areas. And blue roofs will capture and retain rainwater, which cools the building, reduces the amount of runoff into urban waterways. So there's really a lot of different things that these systems do. So stormwater reduction, we have heat island reduction. They can provide habitat for wildlife. They can improve air quality by absorbing pollutants, and it's a great solution. You don't see them very often, at least in this area. I know they have some more in like the Pacific Northwest. They have a lot more green roofs. You do have to design buildings a little bit differently because you're adding a lot more weight on top of them, but it's a great thing to look at for new development if you can incorporate features like this into new buildings.
I would just add that, like, with the multitude that's hitting us in the Southeast with like distribution centers, I feel like we need to start thinking about innovative ways to address those. And like we lose a lot of land for those buildings. And can we mitigate those impacts? Can we think forward? Can we start doing some of these in place?
Yeah, definitely. And another topic, so this almost goes along with what Lucas was talking about earlier when he was going over his like flood modeling and H&H analysis. So when you're doing these analyses, you're looking at areas that flood, and then you can look at different ways to restore the area. So you can either find some way to hold back stormwater upstream, or you can do a stream restoration. So a lot of times flooding occurs because there's an undersized culvert and, you know, it rains and the stormwater backs up and it causes flooding. So is there a way to widen the culvert? Is there a way to improve it so that water is passing through it more effectively? So stream restoration is the process of improving the health and function of streams, rivers, and other freshwater systems that have been impacted by human activity. So there's a few different types of stream restoration. They include physical restoration, biological restoration, and chemical restoration. Physical restoration focuses on modifying the physical structure of the stream to improve its functionality, stability, and habitat quality. This can involve reshaping the stream channel, stabilizing stream banks, and adding in-stream structures such as rocks and logs to create habitat for fish and other organisms. Biological restoration focuses on improving the health and diversity of the aquatic ecosystem. So this is done by restoring and enhancing the natural process that support the growth and survival of plants and animals. It can involve restoring wetlands, planting native vegetation along the stream bank, and removing invasive species that are harmful to the ecosystem. And then the last one that I mentioned was chemical restoration. So this involves improving water quality by reducing the amount of pollutants and contaminants that enter the stream. So it can involve implementing best management practices on adjacent agriculture lands where you know that there's pesticides going into a stream, and that's reducing water quality. It can be done by reducing stormwater runoff from urban areas, and also by limiting the discharge of industrial wastewater to streams. And the last thing we're going to talk about is raised buildings, raising roads, and wet flood proofing. So sometimes homes and facilities are unknowingly built in flood prone areas. So flooding might cause damage to the building structure after it's already built. So, you build this house and it's 10 or 20 years later and it starts to flood more nearby. So this is causing damage to the structure, utilities. There's also the potential that if there's only one access road, if the road floods, then there's no way for emergency vehicles to access and there's no way for the people living there to get out. So some solutions to these problems include managed retreat. So moving somewhere different, somewhere that you're not going to be impacted by these hazards. But not everybody wants to do that. People don't want to just leave their house and move somewhere else if they've been living there for forever. And so there are solutions which include raising buildings, raising the roadways so that people can still get in and out. Also wet proofing facilities and utilities. So this image on the right is showing a house that's been, so it's utilities are elevated. So instead of having them in the basement where they're more likely to flood, they've moved them all upstairs and they've essentially allowed the basement to flood so that all of the important infrastructure in the house is now out of the flood area. And if it rains, then some water gets into the basement and it's not a big deal and they pump it out. On the left, this is showing some different solutions to raising roadways. So there's raising the roadway, but keeping it a road. Maybe adding culverts if you need to get water underneath. There's also a span bridge. So this is allowing the natural system to continue underneath the roadway. But there's a lot of different ways to do it, but this is just allowing for people to still continue using the road even if there's high waters nearby. So benefits to these adaptation measures include mitigating flood damage. They ensure safety to the buildings and to the people who are using these areas. They protect property, so they make sure that these buildings, that cars, that people are not being damaged. So they're protecting your home, they're protecting your property, they're protecting the people living there. It saves people money, so this is going to be on flood insurance. This will be saving money just on general replacement and rebuilding. Lowering insurance premiums and promoting economic development. So when a building or a roadway is raised, it can make these flood-prone areas more attractive for development, so that can spur economic growth. So if somebody goes to look at a place where they're thinking about living and they're looking at these roads that are elevated, houses are elevated, they're protected, they're not within the flood zone anymore, they're much more likely to want to move there than if they're going and looking at houses that are constantly being flooded, roads that are always flooded.
Thanks, Lindsay. So here again are our action items that we've pulled from other plans. You're not limited to these, but we will rank them. So continue to think about ideas outside of these. But other plans suggested steering growth toward existing infrastructure, doing a comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance and building code for sustainable development, green space requirements for new developments, improved site design, updated water and sewer infrastructure to accommodate growth, and exploring the possibility of a conservation subdivision ordinance. Again, those are from the other plans, but please use the chat or the Q&A if you have ideas outside of those. And we'll jump into our second to last Slido.
All right, that should be ready to go.
Trying to get my bearing on what I'm about to do.
All right, looks like we've got some good responses. Green space requirements, reviewing the zoning ordinance, nice. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. We will take all that into consideration when we create some new mitigation actions. Lindsay, let's jump to the next slide. Okay, so second to last item today is mitigation actions for non-natural or miscellaneous hazards. So also in this plan, we are addressing non-natural hazards such as hazardous material spills, radiological events, environmental contamination, pandemics, cybersecurity, and dam failure. There's some good mitigation actions that you guys have already created in your last plan for these, but we want to open the floor to get some ideas. Some additional ideas for these. So this will be open-ended. Again, no idea is a bad idea. All ideas are good ideas. So please, when we open up this Slido, throw out any idea that you've got. We are interested in any and all of them. So Lindsay, there should be one last Slido for this one. So again, this is for non-natural hazards or miscellaneous hazards, hazardous material spills, cybersecurity, pandemic. What do you think that Effingham County could do better to address some of these non-natural hazards? Give everyone a couple more minutes. Looks like a couple people are typing. And these won't display, right, Lindsay? These will come right to us.
Sorry, I have too many screens up.
That's okay.
These, I think these will display. They should be anonymous, but they'll display on the screen. We can try just typing one in to see how it comes up.
All right, looks like a few people submitted ideas. Great. One more typing. Just give it one more minute.
And we can leave this question open while we're going through the rest of the presentation. So it should still be up on your phone. If you think of anything as we go through the rest of the conversation, then you can just keep adding to it.
Yes, and if you think of anything later in the day, feel free to email any one of us. We're happy to take your suggestions and ideas. All right, let's keep on going. Just a few more outstanding items today, and then we'll wrap up. Next time, we will have your list of generated mitigation actions, and we will work on prioritizing those. That is a FEMA requirement. All mitigation actions have to be prioritized. So we will likely do this via a survey ahead of the meeting. So please keep an eye on your emails. We'll likely send something out. I think that'll be easier if people can sort of prioritize them on their own time. And then when we meet in the meeting, we can review all of the input that we've received and make sure everybody's on the same page. Yep, we can do next slide.
Sorry, my
That's okay.
mouse scroller went a little crazy.
Again, I just want to reiterate that we are really trying to push this survey to as many folks as possible. We will email you out this QR code as well as a link. Please share it via Facebook, social media, text with your neighbors, your friends, everybody that you know. We would really appreciate it. The more responses we get to this survey, the better. So keep an eye out for that as well. And I believe this is the last item of the day. Just a reminder that there is a public meeting to present the draft plan on March 29th at 6:00 p.m. in the Effingham County Administrative Building. It'd be really great to have some of our helpers like y'all show up there. And again, please spread the word. We'd love to have the public show up and provide input on the draft. The website, as another reminder, will be up and running within the next week. We'll use that website to communicate information about public meetings, public engagement, the survey, and eventually we will use the website to post the draft plan. So keep an eye on that. We'll email you all once it's up. And we thank you all for joining today. Oh, let's go over the timeline. Sorry, real quick. Last thing, I promise. Today is March 8th. This was meeting 5. March 10th, we're looking to have website updates complete and the survey will be live. March 22nd is our next meeting. And again, that'll be the prioritization of mitigation actions. March 24th, like I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we will be down in Effingham County doing public engagement at the Night in Effingham County event. EMA will be joining us for that, or we will be joining EMA, I should say. March 29th, there's a public meeting on the draft plan like we just spoke about. Put a big star next to that one, so hopefully some of y'all can join us for that. April 5th will be our last meeting. We will wrap up, review the draft plan, and talk about incorporating public input. And then April 11th, we will be submitting the plan to FEMA and GMA. Shanna, I'm seeing your question. How long will the survey be live and when is the end date? So we need enough time to incorporate all of the responses from the survey into the plan. So likely we will wrap up the survey probably around April 1st is just what I'm thinking. There hasn't been a set date for that yet. We want to keep it as live. We want to keep it live for as long as possible, but obviously need time to incorporate and review that input. So we will keep you posted on that. Any other questions? Comments, concerns? All right, all. Thank you very much for your participation today. It is greatly appreciated. Again, if any other ideas strike, please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us. We are happy to talk through any ideas with you.
Yes, thank you very much. And we appreciate it. And great Facebook post already. Very nicely done.
Yes, we appreciate that. All right, all. Have a great day.
Thank
Thanks.
you.